That same year, news have reached the Russian court of what many have long been expecting to happen: a war between British India and Jaisalmer. Despite initial success, the armies of Jaisalmer were pushed back to the Indus River. In 1860, Napoleon's Second French Empire had been able to force the Algerians to submit to France, becoming nothing more than a colony. Now, other than French Eritrea, France had a solid presence on the African continent. That same year, seeing how strong France has become, the papacy had jumped off of the sinking Spanish ship, becoming an ally of the French emperors. In 2 years' time, in collaboration with each other, France and the Netherlands were able to colonize Indonesia and the region of Indochina. Napoleon's popularity at home was at its peak. It was 1865 when Milan was able to gain total control of northern Italy. However, the French-aligned papacy did not allow for further conquest, because for obvious reasons, that would mean a two-front war against France too. In 1861, Alexander I came out to the people and proclaimed the Peasant Reform Edict, emancipating all Russian serfs. Finally, after centuries of having to endure this injustice, the serfs were finally freed from their enslavement. However, to not anger the nobility, the recently freed serfs had to collectively pay off the debt caused by the loss of free slave labor. But despite that, jubilation was all over Russia. While many great things happening in Europe, the Ottoman Empire was busy conquering the Arabian Peninsula. Seeing this Turkish aggression, Armenia signed an alliance treaty with Russia, lest it be attacked next. In the spirit of his liberal reforms, Alexander reorientated the spending priorities of the Russian state, now focused more on economic investment and development. In 1869, it finally happened: Michigan went to war with Quebec. However, instead of a quick resolution to this conflict, it ended up lasting until 1873. This war showed to the European powers that any war between technologically advanced powers will end up in a pointless bloodbath. Nevertheless, after years of back and forth, the armies of Quebec were able to fight their way into the capital city of Michigan, Columbia. In the ensuing peace treaty, the government of Michigan agreed to never seek to take back the lands of the former governorate of Martinique. This created a situation in which Quebec was now the dominant player in the American East. In 1867, wishing to avoid war with France, the British agreed to abandon their protectorates of Brittany and Normandy. Predictably, Napoleon led his armies against the two defenseless states, thereby reunifying most of France. There was still Alsace remaining under German control, but Napoleon was not willing to risk everything over one province, just yet. It is under Napoleon III that Paris was transformed from a standard European city into what many tourists at the time called the City of Lights, making it an icon of French culture. In 1869, a truly magnificent achievement was made. The British managed to construct a canal connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. This was not a new dream, but with the many advancements in technology, it was finally made a dream come true. In 1873, Napoleon III passed away, leaving the French throne to Napoleon IV, but he died in 1979, leaving Napoleon V in his place. Continuing his reforms, due to the growing influence of the Decembrist faction of the Russian nobility, the emperor was convinced that more liberal reforms were needed. This included establishing an elected parliament, which would be voted on by all property-owning male citizens aged 25 and over. Thus, democracy came to Russia, with the State Duma. Just like in France with the Senate, Germany with its Reichstag, or Spain with its Cortes. In 1877, after introducing many reforms within Russia, Alexander decided it's time to redirect attention to foreign policy too now. This involved going to war with the Turks again. Once again, Russian armies were beating Turkish armies in the Danubian duchies of Moldavia and Wallachia. The war was a very quick one, ending in October of 1877 with the Russian armies reaching the Mediterranean Sea. This swiftness of this war left the Ottomans in total state of confusion, to the point that no one in the government noticed that France was able to snatch away the region of Tunisia. With the peace treaty, the Treaty of San Stefano, Russia did not want to scare the other great powers by being too aggressive in their demands. Therefore, it was decided to go easy on the Ottomans, liberating the nations of Bulgaria, Romania, Montenegro, and Serbia. In the chaos, even Croatia managed to occupy Bosnia. The following year, knowing there is nothing that they can do, Turkish diplomats agreed to hand over the island of Cyprus to the British. By 1879, the French managed to expand their colony in the Horn of Africa into Ethiopia. In 1881, the Ottomans were forced by the French imperial government to quote-unquote lease Egypt to them for an indefinite number of years. Essentially, Egypt became a French colony, supplying massive quantities of cotton. For many decades now, many explorers ventured onto the so-called Dark Continent, exploring the vast African land. Naturally, modern medicine allowed for Europeans to somewhat live there semi-permanently. This led to desires to colonize all of it. However, no one wanted a major continent-wide war over it. So, the Congress of Berlin was summoned. After some debating, the British, French and Germans came to an agreement to carve up this continent in a balanced manner. Resource-rich regions like the Congo were handed to the inconsequential power of the Netherlands. In Portugal, news of the results of these negotiations threw the government into crisis, since the Portuguese delegation was sent to Berlin in order to convince the other powers to connect the colonies of Angola and Mozambique. However, Britain and Germany quickly realized the consequences of giving the Netherlands the Congo. The Netherlands were still faithful allies of the French. And with Egypt under their control, France was now back in a position of being a serious threat to peace in Europe. The old spheres of influence that made up European geopolitics no longer mattered. This now was a time of coalitions. Thus, two coalitions were formed in the immediate aftermath of the Congress of Berlin, the Entente, with France, the papacy and the Netherlands on one side, and Great Britain, German Empire and Portugal in the Central Powers. Fearing French conquest, Catalonia also joined the Central Powers. Russia cared little for these colonial quarrels, as the Emperor, Alexander I, was assassinated by socialist terrorists, leaving his son, Alexander II in charge of Russia. Blaming the death of his father on his liberal reforms, Alexander II was determined to reverse as many of his father's reforms as possible. The new emperor understood that Russia will eventually have to get involved in the Western European tensions. Some began to fear that a major European war is going to start over damned foolish thing in Africa.